Hi, and welcome back to Glassboxed, writing automated Cucumber tests. Today we are going to have a look at scenario hooks. We will look at what a scenario hook is, why we would use scenario hooks, and how to use scenario hooks. So what is a scenario hook? Well, a hook is an unseen step which allows us to perform various actions at certain fixed points in our scenarios or tests. For instance, one example of a Cucumber hook is the before and after method, a concept shared by JUnit, if you like. So, going forward from that, why would you use hooks? Well, one prime example to write, say something like a before and after hook for Cucumber WebDriver test would be to allow better WebDriver management. For instance, we can create the driver in our before hook and close it in our after hook. So let's have a look how it looks in code. So before we do that, I've already written, to save some time, a basic scenario in which I go to my zoo site, I click on adoption, and then I check for an available animal. I then populate a form, and then I check that there's a confirmation message on the other side. So if I were to demonstrate that, what I will do is effectively click on adoption, then click on the second check button. The first check button has no animals. So the second check button has. It's a turtle named George. And then I get to a form. I'll populate the form with some values. Check. And then my test is just going to check to see that the adoption has been set up. And that's it. Nothing too complicated. The step definition. So I've mapped each step to a step definition. And in my first given step, I create the driver here, and I navigate to the site. I then click on the adoption link. I then click on the second check button. I then populate the form and click on the submit button, and then I check using an assertion whether the appropriate message is visible or not, and then I close the browser. So the focus of this video is to demonstrate hooks. So if any of this doesn't really make sense, I'd advise that you check out my earlier videos on writing Cucumber tests if you'd like to learn how to set up this framework, or if you're more interested in what these API calls mean, then I'd advise you check out my WebDriver playlist instead. Right, so let's move forward from this. So what I'm going to do is quickly run the test just to prove that the test works. So I'm going to run it and see what happens. So the browser is opened, clicked on adoption, filled in the form, and we have a summary that's printed out at the end, which is effectively telling us that our scenario ran without any problems. Fantastic. That's what we were trying to look towards. But again, before we talk about hooks, let's just have a quick look at our step definitions again. So notice that I'm creating the driver inside our given method. There's nothing really wrong with it, but I consider it bad practice, and I'll explain why in a bit. And if we look at this driver quit method, which quits WebDriver, another way of shutting down the whole WebDriver system, if you like, is happening in our last assertion step. Again, really nothing wrong. There's no rules telling us we aren't allowed to do this. By all means, we are. We can put whatever code we want wherever we want. But again, I consider this bad practice, and this is why. So if we take this step as an example, where we're saying I navigate to adoption, everything that's happening inside this step is very, very specific to the purpose of this step. In other words, the only thing this step is interested in is clicking on adoption and nothing else. And the code that's happening inside it is doing just that as well. If we were to look at, say, the second, or rather the third step, where we check for a button and click on it, again, this exact thing and only thing is happening inside this step definition. If you were to look at this step, for instance, here we're saying I populate the form. These first 4 lines of code are indeed doing that, populating the form, But this last line, it almost seems out of step with this step definition, because this step definition is just saying I populate the form. However, what the actual step actually is doing is it's populating the form and submitting it. So maybe it would be better if you were to move this step, say, outside of this particular step definition, because this step definition is only concentrating on populating the form, nothing to do with submitting the form. Now, that concept of whatever is happening inside the step should reflect exactly what the step is saying is, to me, an important aspect of writing step definitions. Because if we were to look at, say, the step definition without looking at the code, I should assume all this does is it checks for an animal's availability. Nothing to do with the type of animal, nothing to do with the size of the name. It doesn't care about that. Similarly, this step only looks at populating the form, and it shouldn't also care about submitting the form or checking for errors or anything like that. So I've left this here on purpose, as I've done in a few other videos, just to kind of demonstrate this isolation of responsibility for a given step. So now that we've kind of got this this concept drilled into our mind frame, if we now have a look at our given step, the very first step, and then our last then step, the only then step, you can see that using that concept, this creating a new driver and this quitting of the driver isn't actually part of the step definition, and or rather it's not part of the step in our feature file. So this seems even more out of place than the click, because although the click isn't doing what the step is describing, it is still within the scope of the form, if you like. But this kind of WebDriver management is completely out of scope to navigating to somewhere, or this quitting the driver is again completely out of scope to this assertion method where we're just checking to see we've got some text visible on some page. And this is where hooks come in. Hooks are a great way to manage things which are not directly related to your steps as such, in that they help you to get to your step, but they have nothing to do with the actual execution or the logic that's happening inside your step. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually move this out, as well as the quit, somewhere else, and still run it as part of our scenario without actually invoking the steps at all. And the way we can do this is by using the before and after hooks that Cucumber provides us with. So if I start writing a before method, and then I give it a sensible method name like public void test setup, what I can do now is I can move this in here. I can similarly create an after method, and I'll explain what these methods actually mean. Again, give it a sensible name, so I'll say test shutdown. And I'll move the driver quit in here as well. Now, if you have a look, ignoring this for the moment, now everything seems like it's much more in place, much more manageable. Almost all of our steps are now looking like they do actually what they're designed to do, what they've been written to do. They don't do anything they shouldn't be doing. Now let's concentrate more on this before and after method. So what do they actually do? Well, the before method, exactly like JUnit, is what's known as a hook in Cucumber, in which we're saying this method will run before any given scenario runs. So if we had, say, multiple scenarios, for the moment ignore the fact that these are exactly the same scenarios. Let's just say we had multiple different scenarios doing different things. This before method is never explicitly called in each of our scenario, but because it's marked with the before annotation, this method will always run before any of our given scenarios run. Similarly, the after method will run after every step in our scenarios have run. Another additional important note is that the before method and the after method always run, regardless of whether your scenarios pass, whether they fail, whether you get output saying steps are pending, steps unimplemented, whatever, the before method and after method always run. There's only a few circumstances where they don't run. For instance, your code blows up and nothing runs. Then fine, nothing will run. But the nature of the before method and after method is that they always run as part of a scenario. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to put in a system out print line just to prove that our methods run. So I'm just going to say before method executed so that we can track it if you like. I'm going to copy that here as well and just replace this with after. And the reason why we have red lines is because we haven't imported in the necessary libraries. So if I hover over and try and import, the library you want to import is not the org.junit, because this is JUnit and before. The before we're trying to write is part of Cucumber's API. So the library you want to import, quite naturally, is cucumber.api.java. And do the same thing for the after method. Now, let's go back. Let's get rid of all of these unnecessary scenarios. Let's save. And now what we're going to do is right click and run and see what happens. Right, so let's look at our output. So notice that the before method executed print line was printed before anything actually happened. Before the browser even opened, because that was the first thing that's supposed to happen. And after this scenario result was printed, we had the after method executed print line printed. This is signaling to us that the before method and after method did execute, even though we didn't explicitly define it here as part of our steps here. And then we got the necessary steps with our results. Again, just saying everything passed. Fantastic. So the important thing to note here is we can do a lot of management in our before and after method for each and every one of our given scenarios, which really helps us because when we're writing, say, WebDriver tests, we can better manage our driver somewhere else and not clutter up our steps anywhere else. It just makes it much more manageable, much more easier. Some might ask why go through the point of doing this? There's no point in actually doing this, because if your given step, say, is exactly the same for 100 or 200 different steps, or let's take out numbers. Let's just say for n number of tests that you write, your given is always the same, so you might as well write it here. Then yeah, that's actually quite a strong argument to say there's no point in writing the before method. But my answer to that would be, if you want to better manage your WebDriver from just a WebDriver's perspective, then yeah, do it here, because now you can isolate your driver here and you can do various other things. You can add in options, if you like, or capabilities to your driver depending on what type of browser you're using. You can also write a lot of logic around your driver as well. You can change your driver at will as part of your test, and the logic for that would be in your before method and not in your given method. Remember, the given method, like I'm saying, I'm just trying to imply that the step that you write, the description of the step, should be very strongly related to exactly what is happening inside your given. And the purpose of the before and after method is to handle logic of setting up a test and cleaning up a test. And this is, strictly speaking, setting up a test, and this is, strictly speaking, cleaning up a test. We can actually take hooks a little further as well. We can use something called tagged hooks as well. Now, I was going to do tagged hooks as a different video, but the difference between tagged hooks and scenario hooks is very small, so I'm just kind of blending the two into one quick video to give a much more solid overview. So what's a tagged hook? Well, a tagged hook is basically where we can give this before and after annotations more power and more flexibility over how to run what we run when we run. So let me explain what that means. Whenever we run, say, this scenario, this before and this after will always run. And if we were to write many more scenarios, this before and this after will always run, because that's what they're designed to do. They are, if you like, a generalized before and after. They will always run for any given scenario you write. But you've got the ability to write multiple before methods and multiple after methods with tags which will only run for given scenarios which you also tag. So let me demonstrate that with some code. Let's just say that we wanted this scenario to run a very specific set of before and after methods and not any given before and after method. We can tag it with something like this. So let me just pretty this. So now what we're saying is this scenario has this particular tag called the @web tag. Now if we were to go in and run, what will happen is this before and after will still run for this scenario, because that's what we said. We've said that the before and after, these are general, these will run for any given step in any given feature file. But if you now were to say build this up a bit, and we need to set it up a bit more, we can now provide a parameter saying something like, well, we need to give it the tag that we're trying to run it against. And let's just leave this out. Now what we have done is we've basically said, like I said before, we're now marking this scenario with this one particular tag, and anywhere this tag is applied to a given Cucumber hook, this will now run as part of this feature file, and it will run in that order as well. So when we now run this, what do you suspect is going to happen? Well, what should happen is this before and after will always run, because these are general, these always run as part of any given scenario. But because we've now additionally tagged our scenario with this this @web tag, it will also run this additional before and after. So let's test this out and see what happens. And there you go. So you notice that the before method, the generalized before method, ran first, and then the tagged before ran. After that, the tagged after ran first, and then the non-tag, the non-after method ran, and it ran in that order. And the ordering is important. The reason why I ran in sort of is because I said the before, the non-tagged before and after are generalized; they always run, but the tagged ones run afterwards. Now let me demonstrate this a little bit further. So if I now copy this and give this a different one, let's just call it dummy. Right. Now when I run this, what do you think is going to happen? Well, this should happen exactly as is, and this before and after method tagged with the dummy variable shouldn't run at all, because in our scenario we aren't passing in this dummy tag. So let's run it again. And there you go. Now someone might ask, why run it with tags? What's the point? If we have a generalized before and after, just do everything in there. There's no point in running tags, is there? Well, there's probably a couple of you saying, actually hold, I can see some good reasoning to do tags. And the reasoning is just that. Because we are running, say, this WebDriver test. And remember that Cucumber, although it's kind of famous for running WebDriver tests, this is certainly not the only framework that Cucumber is used to run tests against. Cucumber is used and can be used to run tests of various different natures. Low-level tests using various different type of technologies, mocking information using REST calls. There's an ocean's worth of different frameworks that Cucumber can use. And if in your project you are using multiple different frameworks and running your tests via Cucumber, then it makes sense to have these tags and run a different set of before and after method for your tests. And this makes managing your test a little bit more easier and manageable. So one other thing you can do is, in this step definition file we have step definitions, and again, taking this concept of step and isolation a little bit forward, we can move all of these before and after methods to say some kind of before and after method class, and then just extend it here as part of the step definition, so the whole thing runs in one go. So hooks are incredibly straightforward to write. Just a hook, a method name, and then whatever logic you want inside that step. And the ability to provide extra options via tags so that specific ones run as part of specific scenarios just enhances that power. They are really quick to write, easy to write, and the output you get is quite a lot. So the overhead compared to the value is very, very small. So in this video we've actually learned, I think, probably an important lesson more towards the management and maintainability of tests than writing kind of heavy duty technical tests. We've only learned one small feature in reality. I mean, this isn't a big huge topic or concept, it's a really simple one, but we've learned a lot, I feel. And that's it for this video, folks. If you enjoy my video and find they bring some new knowledge or insight into writing Cucumber tests, then please subscribe and rate. If you have any questions or video suggestions, then please leave a comment below. Many thanks for watching. Until next time, ciao.